Chairman, we're live.
Welcome back to our meeting. It's 10:15 on June 30th. This is a workshop to discuss future road validation process. So, I don't know who's leading this conversation, but the current process, we have a process laid out in code, if I'm remembering correctly. So, Dan, I'm assuming that you're wanting to look at something to change something, or who's wanting to change what we're currently doing is that process? Or do we need to codify it more clearly?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I think a lot of times we look at validations holistically as part of capturing the property and identifying who owned the property at what time, which is important. But I also think that there is an opportunity to evaluate it on an engineering review side. And so the way I'm thinking about this is coming up with a strategy for future validations, that we look at it for safety for the traveling public, and to identify whether or not it even meets county standards. If we identify specific areas that are of concern with like roadside obstructions, could be anything, could be trees that need to come out. I think as part of the review, and I discussed this with Steve Anderson, our weeds superintendent, in certain areas of the county, we do have noxious weeds that can provide issues for people if they don't understand that they're in areas where if they rub their hands, like if they're in a specific area, if they rub their hands and rub their eyes, they will go blind. This is the spurge. Leafy spurge is known holistically over at the West Mountain Road area. We've identified it. We do have our noxious weed map that's on the website that identifies all noxious weeds in the county and what has been treated. It's the areas where we don't know. I think we need to identify it, to clear it, or to actually spray it. That would be a concern on the safety aspect of it. There could be areas where some of the roadside scarp, if you will, this is where it's very steep, and if the scarp loses its integrity, it could have a kind of a landslide effect over the roadway. If we don't identify those locations, I think we're going to have an issue with anybody going back there or anywhere that we have these validations. And I'm assuming in most cases it's areas where it's not, it would probably not meet current county standards.
Not just about any road you go on back in there.
Well, I mean, it is, but I think we need to identify them before they become public. I think that's the important piece that I want to ensure on. And I've come across these programs with LTAC, the road safety audits is what they call it. But I would like to transform it into road validation audits for us here at Valley County. And these are certain areas where you want to identify if it's roadside safety, curvature of the roadway, drainage, all aspects of what is a potential issue for the specific road.
And I want to go backwards and set up this conversation a little bit more thoroughly. So these are really, since I've been on the council, we've identified certain roadways that were the historical roadways into Valley County, RS 2477 roadways. And these roadways are pathways into our recreation community. And so since I have been here, what we have been working on is identifying key pathways that we don't want to lose as development occurs, to connect our public with the natural resources, the natural areas of our county. And or the latest one that we just did, which raised this, was because the FAA had come to us and said, we can no longer access the FAA tower and it is impacting our ability to provide aeronautical support in the area. And so as we move forward now, I think what our conversation is going to be about is which roadways are most prevalent to Valley County to maintain and preserve as our recreation pathways. So this may not be that it will be for the traveling public. And what I'm hearing you say is we need to identify the roadways that we're looking at, whether they are for recreation purposes and only valid for certain types of vehicles on them, whether these are traveled pathways where we are going to reopen those for actual use for vehicles, that type of thing. So there may be two different types of paths that we're looking at. One where we might put a vehicle on it, a regular over-the-road vehicle, versus another of UTVs, razors, that type of pathway. Is that what I'm understanding now to be more prevalent with this conversation? Is we might need to identify the type of path that it is?
It could be. I mean, because of the limitations of each vehicle that is being used, it elevates it in a different classification, if you want to call it that.
Right. I think I think we need to clarify what road validation is. It's not taking a private road and turning it into a public road. The road, Idaho's road law requires that the county have a road map that identifies where all the public roads in the county are, and that map has to be updated every 5 years. And so when that road validation process kind of gets out of time and we don't keep that map up to date, then I think what's happened, not just in this county, but in a lot of counties, then private property owners that own parcels on either side or over on both sides, they put a gate up to keep the cows in, and then that just kind of evolves into a gated road, and people perceive that as private property and a private road. So the validation process is to just validate that map and say, no, historically this has always been a public road. This is a public road, not a private road, and validate it accordingly. So that I don't know that that's ever occurred here, other than the petition that we just did earlier this spring with Old Council Road. Now, 2 years ago, we contracted with Historical Research Associates to do the legwork on Old Council Road, and then this board decided that was valuable information to help us keep the map up to date. And so she's going to come back. In fact, she said early July she's going to contact me for direction. So I appreciate the discussion and the workshop. I think that it's important to have, because if we proceed with additional validations on roads where there's questions as to whether or not this is a public road and always has been a public road versus a private road, and I don't know where to go next. We'll leave that up to you to prioritize that. It will have an impact on the road department, because just like we've seen on Old Council Road, if a gate has to come down, then cattle guard needs to go in. So there's going to be an impact there. And whether or not that's going to be a task that you want the road department to take care of, or we want to contract that out, we need some direction on the next one, so there's not confusion about how that's gonna work. So,
Personally, when we go to decommission a road, I totally disagreed with the last one that happened.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able to look at those holistically also. You know, provide support one way or another and not just take word of mouth that something happened here, there, or whatever.
Which one was decommissioned?
Corral Creek
Crowd Creek.
portion, not all of it, just a portion of it. But, yeah, these roads, you know, some of these, like we found with Old Council Road, they were built, I mean, early 1900s, sometimes even in the 1800s, and the historical data that we need to make a proper determination on whether to validate it as a public road versus a private road sometimes needs to go back, clear back then to make that determination. That, I mean, obviously, as you saw with both of these road issues that we've had recently, is going to generate some issues with the adjacent landowners, but also with how that's going to affect other counties and their responsibilities going forward. Now, you have the ability to determine what level of maintenance to establish on these roads. It could be significant, or it could be very little, if anything.
And it could just be 4-wheel drive or 4-wheel,
Jeep trails.
yeah, that type of thing. We could put up bollards so that a car can't get through it, you know, specific width or something like that.
And not to speak for Dan, but I think the point is to a roadmap that just identifies a road as a public road may not provide enough information to the traveling public. It might be a good idea to
We get a car at
dive
the
into
top
that.
and
Right,
shouldn't be
right.
there.
They may have different categories of roads that may require a different type of vehicle to safely.
drive on things that are not even roads, like snowmobile trails. So therefore, we should probably be really clear in what we're doing.
One thing, instead of reinventing the wheel too, is as far as like the maintenance level or the classifications, is like Forest Service roads are classified according to maintenance levels. And so like a maintenance level 1 road gets a lot of maintenance level, whatever, 3 or 4, that might be a Jeep trail that never sees a blade or any action at all. So, I mean, that
Yeah.
might
Do we
be,
have anything in our classifications, Dan, that's
do.
like that?
Do we
So
still
when-
have that lady that was doing the historical
Mhm.
working for us?
I anticipate she's going to reach out here in the next couple of weeks and want direction on where we want to go next.
Just so you are all aware, I've been receiving contact information on activity, speculators, if you will, in regards to development in the specific area that we're talking about. So
Which
it's
specific area are we talking about?
the Old Council Road.
Okay.
So, I guess in part in making sure that they get the proper information, as they do their speculating, for classification like this and how it's gonna be treated, it's gonna be pretty significant in terms of identifying what maintenance we're gonna provide on it.
So in the development realm, when a developer comes in, we have always made them improve the road to the standard at which it would become a full county road. And so after that development occurs, yes, because of the tax base that it's created, then we can maintain that road to a different standard, which unfortunately it doesn't impact you because we've never historically done that. But I think we're gonna have to have that conversation about development helping to pay for maintaining roads as we move forward. But, I mean, my response to that would be, you know, developer, go talk to planning and zoning. These are gonna be the requirements that you're going to be held to in order to bring any road up to a standard that would be accepted by the county. And it would have to be a full county road.
So, as part of this, when we talk about, maintenance kind of responsibilities and identifying when people want to get access. You know, it does have an impact on us whether or not we provide maintenance, because ultimately I gotta have somebody go out and verify the location, identify if it's, should be, depending on the size of the culvert, what it should be. So when we say minimal, remember, it's always an impact. It will always be an impact to us.
And while I understand that, I'm a little confused because we have development all over the county, not just in a road that's been validated for public use. I mean, that is a part of the county's responsibility
Correct.
to go out and do these things. So are you advocating on behalf of your department that you may need more employees in order to do this work?
I would highly recommend budget and staff, if we're supposed to take on responsibilities like this, which we never did before. Yes, we would.
How, explain to me how you've never taken on the responsibilities before, because
This would be on like Council Road. If we're providing some type of maintenance responsibility over it, then I will need additional staffs to
sure.
support that.
what we've always done historically is, well, right now anyway, we're not accepting any new roads for maintenance. These are part of an HOA. So any work done, I mean, yes, there would be a little bit of work done up front during the development process, but after that, the HOA has to maintain those internal roads and any connection points to ours.
Right, but your work will be consistently providing a permit review process for any work that's gonna be done within that specific right-of-way.
Yeah.
So it'll be an ongoing maintenance responsibility, even though it appears to be minimal, it will always be incrementally too much for us to handle.
I'm following what you're saying, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking specifically about Old Council Road too, I would say that if you go through a validation process where a gate's been up and the gate needs to be removed, then the question becomes, is the road department gonna install the cattle guard, or are we gonna have somebody else who's gonna manage that project, who's gonna be responsible for making those decisions? And I was hoping that we could kind of come up with that process here today, so there isn't any confusion on that going forward, and that way we've got the coordination. We're all pulling in the same direction when it comes to, taking on these tasks. Because I do agree with Dan that there's always going to be an impact, even if it's going to be front loading. Maybe it's signage along the road and a cattle guard needs to be installed. Nothing further, but that's still an impact. Or if you want to validate a road and then come back with the contractor to handle the signage and handle the cattle guard installation. Just need some direction on how to proceed with that kind of stuff, so we know what your expectations are, I guess.
So remember, even placing the cattle guard, somebody has to maintain it.
Did you put in that agreement that the FAA would maintain the road and plow it? So once the cattle guard was in, then would it?
They've historically provided some maintenance funds for that road. I don't know if that's going to be ongoing, going forward.
I thought I made that. I thought I added that to the
For-
motion.
For several years, that there's been a dispute and some question about whether or not it was a public road or not, and so there hasn't been anybody, and that's kind of what this is kind of where we're at. I mean, where there's no dispute or no question about what's a public road, then
Well, let's just go back a little bit and start at the foundation. So I think we've identified 5 or 6 roads through our Parks and Recreation division, of which we think should be,
there's some question about.
there's some question about it, and that we should they should be validated. So that's where we're gonna start, is with that list. So in my mind is, if we have a division that is saying, we need this road to improve our recreation access, then that becomes Dave's project. And he carries that from beginning to end and includes anything that would need to be done to get that opened up. Obviously with the direction and the help of the road department. But I mean, that's his project. All costs associated with it, you know, working with historical research, getting it accomplished. I think as we assign these projects, that's where it needs to be. Now, if it comes through planning and zoning, where Cinda's got a developer that's, you know, wanting to develop, and she's saying, wait a minute, we think this is a historical road, we need to do something with this. That's part of her division's project. I think just giving it to, I think whoever is leading that conversation has the most knowledge to make sure that what they're trying to accomplish is done at the end of the day. That's my opinion. I think by the time it comes here for final approval for that validation, everyone needs to be on the same page. So if Cinda has something going on, she's gonna need Dan's input. She might need to talk to Dave. You know, that is a part of their project.
So if it's you know, I guess the push for validation is for recreational access, that kind of puts Dave at the point. We're not going to know until we get through the validation process and determine that this is in fact a public road, whether or not there's going to be an impact for the road department or somebody else at that point. So I guess what I'm hearing, I'm restating it just so I'm clear in my mind. Dave will coordinate with the road department for it, whatever the needs are on that particular road, whether it's cattle guard signage or even something more. There needs to be some coordination.
That would be my thought. And when we're validating that we're setting the level of road standard at that moment in time.
Yeah.
I think it would probably make more sense than, rather than adding staff to the road department, hire a contractor. Have them
We have to, yeah.
have them put the cattle guard in, you know, so, and I understand cattle guards take some maintenance, but it's not yearly even, It's, you know, and
It's a minimal
usually
cost.
if there's a landowner up there that needs the cattle guard, they're gonna make sure it's in good working order as well.
And then
It's gonna be
obviously the-
In
developed.
order to.
Well, and I would just add
manage your
too,
responsibilities.
there should be some level of cooperation with the road department, just so that we're doing the right thing.
Oh,
As
absolutely.
we're, you know, like with the past 2 weeks ago, the rush to get the cattle guards in, they were gonna get laid on the ground, which I don't think is the appropriate way to put a cattle guard in, but I'm not a cattle guard expert.
Not at all.
So, again, like having just that oversight or interaction, I think is important.
Absolutely.
The other thing I would just remind you guys is that we don't have a project budget like that. So we would have to come back to you guys to look for money.
You bet. Well, I think those are one-off specialty projects that, yeah, historically we have approved the historical research. But I think what I would like to see from you is that list of roads so that we can actually identify the funding source to do this. So it actually is either underneath your budget, under our budget, or there's something that is set aside for this.
So that really probably is the next step, because I got an email from Amaya 3 weeks ago saying that she was going to be out of the country for a little while, but in early July would be reaching out to basically get direction from us on what those next projects are going to be. So everybody sitting here at the table, I would expect to be involved in that, so we can kind of come up with a plan. Then if that is going to be an impact on Dave's budget, then he can come and prepare a presentation and bring it in front of you like we normally would. So that's helpful for me, because I wasn't quite sure what to tell her when she does reach out. So.
Well, and I think that it would be important for you to have a letter from the rec board, you know, stating that we've identified these are key access points into recreation, and they would like to see that going forward.
I think, like Oki mentioned, is that I think like the next step is gonna be to meet with Amalia and kind of update her on what our priorities are, because she's created this giant database now of all the records that she was able to get from Boise County and the records she was able to get from our vaults. And we have this thing that's got a lot of information in it. And I think that was kind of the last step as far as our contract with her goes, is like, this is what we wanted, is to have all that information in our hands. And then what we decide to do with it is kind of up to us. So we can certainly identify some of the recreational priorities. You know, we had a list of, I think, 7 or 8 roads that triggered this whole project.
And that would help budget-wise too, if we had a plan, a long-term.
Absolutely.
But Dan should probably be looking at that database too and see if there are, roads that there is either some question or dispute about as to whether or not he would have a priority from a road department perspective. They're not necessarily all recreational based roads, even though they do seem to be on the perimeter of the county floor. Just knowing, so we have an accurate map is valuable.
Well, and also just the liability behind it, like he's talking about, you know, I mean, if there is a huge rock face that we think is gonna come down and we're gonna be liable for that or have to go clear it, that doesn't make sense.
When as development sprawls out, you're right, you're gonna have more maintenance just to use that road to get to that development.
Right.
It's just gonna,
Several weeks ago, trying to remember exactly when it came across my computer, the database. So I did have a chance to kind of peruse it a bit. There are concerning routes that I probably question in regards to how it's identified, because I'm not sure if we're supposed to maintain them based on the information that's in the database. It should be, in certain routes, it was identified as no vehicles on it because of the wildlife crossing in the area. So it was limited at that point in time. I want to say it was back in the 70s or but it provides caution in terms of when it's identified in the database, somebody has to track it to where it is today. So that's part of the concern is taking the time to fully vet it, to ensure what we currently have in our roadwork network is what was essentially approved by the board
Well,
at the time.
we also have our official road name list and our official road maps that have been adopted by ordinance. That's kind of the post story of all the research she did. I mean, we have all of that information.
Yeah, we started on
She started with that.
We started on Old Council Road because our map indicated that that was a public road, but the public did not have access to it because there was gates and no trespassing signs. And so that's where the research came in to validate whether or not our map was accurate or not.
FAA needed it.
There could be, yeah, and it showed through the research that it was constructed with county funds when it was originally built back in 1904. I'm probably not getting the year right, but it was early 1900s, and had historically had met the requirements to be a county road or a public road, and there could be some on our list that we just don't have. I mean, it could be the opposite. We could validate that it's private and should have remained or remain in private property. So it just depends on what the research tells us, and the nice thing about that is that we can just kind of start checking off the list these disputed roads and update our map for accuracy purposes, and that way the public will have better access to information.
We're currently working on the project that we brought to you, I think a year ago, on the Clear Creek, with all the DF development cost shares that they're going to bring to you for road validations. I mean, we've been working on that for a year. You were part of that meeting we had a couple weeks ago.
Just that.
Can someone send me the list at some point?
The database.
Or the list that Park and Rec came up with, because that's been floating now for 2 or 3 years. And I think for me, Dan, I hear your concerns. I'm a person that I don't like to lose access points unless we have to. And through development, when DF bought as much ground as they did, we identified that we lost access. And that is something that the public stood up and was very frustrated with. And so I think this is a moment in time where we've already spent this much money to identify what those historical access points were, that we codify those in record. Now we can set the standards, you know, as far as we're not ever going to touch this piece, but it's ours. We have access for the future. But some of them, you know, we may be looking at, developers may be looking at, and we can allow them down the process of development rights and hold them accountable to the costs associated with it. And I certainly hear your concerns. Those are concerns that I think are very valid. And I think that needs to be a part of our road funding conversation with the public. You know, they're frustrated over the condition of our roads. Well, they don't understand that we have these other things that go on behind the scenes too. We need to document all of this. This is the reason that we need additional funding at this moment in time. Historically, the way we've done it is not going to cover it moving forward. So we've got to have those conversations. But I don't want to lose access points because of development. I think that's super critical that we identify those, we codify those in record, and then we can either maintain them or not moving forward.
Don't get me wrong. I am all about being able to access any of the areas that we feel is appropriate. What I'm concerned about is not having eyes on it, not reviewing it, and accepting it without that additional engineering review of the route. And potentially there could be hazards. That's all I'm concerned about.
But understandable, and that's why you're part of the county team. You know, we need that input also. As far as weed mitigation, I mean, I understand that too. The noxious weeds in Belly County can be out of control. Some of this might, however, give us access to try and get to some of the stuff that should be maintained on a you know, more active schedule.
In my discussions with Steve, it's anytime we go out in an area and we start to disturb anything, that's when it gets really bad. So if we can actively spray in the areas before activity happens, we'll be in a better position. But again, it always goes back to
The 2 subdivisions beside me think knapweed is a pretty flower. It is so
For a few
thick.
weeks.
So thick. You
Yeah.
can't even walk through it right now.
anyhow, I just wanted to make sure at
Totally
least
get
we would evaluate it that way.
So, step 1, the list that your rec department has identified in the past. Maybe identifying also some areas where development has made inquiry and come up with that list. Step 2 would be having the research done, historical research done. Step 3 would be identifying, you know, who's in charge of those projects, under which division those projects would align with. And then I think the steps are pretty clear. You know, once that project gets to us, we better have all of these questions identified by working with all of the teams. Mara's in the room too. I mean, it might be something that, you know, we need wildfire to look at. Is there wildfire mitigation that would really be important in that area before development were to occur.
Maybe we should and could add Mara to the list. I think the lesson learned since I've been here with the county and involved in a couple of these is identifying a project lead is going to be really helpful, because there's a lot of questions that come up along the way, and it's not a quick process. I mean, as you saw, it took us a long time to get the hearing noticed and in front of you and the evidence presented for a decision, and then after the decision's made, that requires a considerable amount of follow-up, and just being able to identify this is the person that's in charge, that's got the authority to make decisions. It's going to affect other departments, and will be responsible for, bringing the group together that needs to be part of that discussion. Will be helpful. So we'll definitely make that a part of the process on the next one going forward.
I think planning and zoning is a development side. Dave, hopefully as you hire your replacement and check your division, that you've got something in a job description where this would be a planning position or a project lead for these types of things. Because I think a lot of it will be recreation based, in my opinion, after looking at the list that I've seen in the past.
So we came up with, for Commissioner Caldwell, who wasn't here when we put that together, was looking at a few of the routes that were in dispute after the DFD folks moved in. Some of them were roads like the old council road that we were unsure about what that was. But I think, we also want to broaden our perspective a little bit and think about like some of our right of ways right now that are dedicated but not used. I can think of a handful of those. I can think about, some of the issues that came up with like Arrowhead subdivision, access to the lake, and now we have people's lawns and landscaping taking over our right of ways. So I think,
Agreed.
Adding those things into the discussion is part of it.
I agree with that. Yeah, and I don't, was it Arrowhead? It's not, what is that up there in Donley?
The one south of Donley is Arrowhead Point, on Lee
Oh,
Road.
okay.
That was the one that Amy Loomis brought
Yeah.
her cohort.
Yeah, I think that those are really important conversations to have. That's a huge part of our recreation, being able to
We
get
may
to
never
that.
touch those roads or those access corridors,
Yeah.
but we don't want to lose them either.
Correct. Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of the conversation. Does that answer concerns?
Partially. I mean, I can't honestly say that I'm 100% comfortable, but,
You're an engineer. You are never going to be 100% comfortable.
it's
Is there one-
difficult. It
Almost
really
like a lawyer.
Is there one besides Council Road
Where's
you're
the lawyer?
Try sitting up
currently
here.
concerned with?
I'm sorry?
Is there one besides the Council Road?
Any of the
Have
ones
one?
that we're validating, any ones that I'm always concerned that if we don't have eyes on it, then there is a problem. And when we open it up to the public to have recreation, there is a concern that there could be an issue liability-wise for the county. And so that's where I'm trying to maybe
Raise the red flag.
emotionally get charged by it, but I think I need to, because of my position here, to make sure that we and everybody is safe.
So, can you be more specific about what your concerns are with respect to liability? So I understand
Yeah. So
exactly what it is you're saying.
I think any activity that we have where there's a potential of somebody being blind by noxious weeds, if we don't spray, if there's any activity that is a potential of having.
Road validation has nothing to do with noxious weeds, though. You understand that, though, right?
I understand the concept behind the validation portion of it, right? It's really opening up to the public, correct?
No, it's validating a public road has
Yeah.
always been a public road.
Right, but if there's no activity at this point in time along that route, and now we open it up to the public, that is the concern that I have.
Yeah.
If it was open already and we're just validating it, I have no concern because everybody should be aware of what the issues are out there. It's the ones where we don't have eyes on it. That's the concern I have.
Okay, but I mean, just for the sake of discussion, the noxious weed statute requires that noxious weed be controlled, whether it be on public land or private land. There's a statutory mandate that says noxious weeds need to be controlled. And if we're concerned about leafy spurge, and we know that leafy spurge is out there, then we need to be actively doing something about that to be in compliance with the statute, period. So I don't see the correlation.
I just don't want it to be open yet until we had a chance to go out and spray it. That's the concern.
Gotcha.
So when you open it, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's just going into the backcountry. Don't care.
It's more of a coordination issue then.
Right. Before it becomes active, let's see what issues we have before it
So,
becomes.
and what I'm hearing then is the ordinance needs to specifically state these divisions need to be engaged before, or the process needs to show that all of these divisions need to be engaged before the road is valid.
And I'm sure it had gone through this process with all the departments, except I was hired
Yeah, this,
later. Now I want to make sure,
We hear your concern.
I just want
So
to make
you want to travel the roads and identify noxious weeds before,
I think before it becomes an issue for the public, we should actually physically view all of it. That's what I'm indicating.
I would agree with that. I mean, there could be areas that could be dangerous and not,
If
know,
we're
should not be.
unaware and we open it to the public and there's an issue,
Well, it's already open to
Or-
the public though.
it's not though.
What do you mean?
There's gates on it. Nobody's going up.
The gates are.
They're not locked. They've been used for the last, decades.
the
That
gates
one
are-
specifically.
On Old Council Road. And I mean, we had been up and down the road multiple times. You guys hadn't, but, I know Jeff has been up there in a UTV in the past, so it wasn't like a blind road that we'd never seen before.
But not all of these are gonna happen all at once. Right. It'll be
But I think the process makes sense, that everybody gets a chance to look at it first. These are, this is information to the commissioners that should be, documented. These are things that we know to be true or that we feel, should be mitigated before we do this. So I can understand that.
Keep Steve busy.
I would just, thinking about Old Council Road again, it's like one of the points that I guess we do want to try to do is with a road like the Old Council Road, we want to make sure that the signage is clear at the bottom of the road. This is a mountain road. And so one of the things I guess I would wonder is like, since we're just talking about that specific road right now, is whose responsibility is it to put those warning signs up?
Well, the rec department brought this to us. This was your project, so I would get the signs up.
And I need to check with the road department to make sure that we have the right specs and things like that.
Correct. Yep. Use your partners, but you take the lead on it and make sure they are.
yeah, I appreciate that aspect of it. I think that we have a classification system in place, but to get that information out to the public may require some signage at roads, at the beginning or intersections of roads that indicate, maybe it's a Jeep trail or maybe 4-wheel drive should be required or
County maintenance.
or something along those lines that give the public some sense of what the condition of the road is and the travelability of it. You don't want a Honda Civic going up a.
Yeah.
You should have seen what I saw yesterday on Lick Creek.
Right.
Do you guys have any disagreement with my thought process on the process?
No,
Going on to it.
signage to me is everything. You can't have enough signage on backcountry roads. That helps people make decisions.
Yeah.
oh, sorry, that it makes sense that the person bringing the project to the commissioners needs to be the one in charge, making sure everything's complete. So it's not just handed off to a different department.
And commissioners, my apologies for adding this. I just think it should be identified if it's gonna be the recreation department paying for the signs or the road department paying for the signs. Some of these things should be fleshed out as well, just the finer details.
And because it's not in the budget, I mean, it might be something that we do build on this, for this specific one, but I think moving forward, again, once we get that list secured, we kind of know what kind of, costs we're gonna, be with that. I think we put a project list under Dave's division. And so he does have funds to do this kind of stuff with. And maybe something under Cinda's, a little bit extra under Cinda's. Oh, you would charge the developer though, if it was a
Developer would
development.
have to pay for it.
Yeah, development have to pay for it. So I think under Dave's, there should be a line item for this type of project.
Yeah, I think what we're gonna find is that you're gonna find similar issues with the next road, Gates go up just to keep the cows in, not necessarily some malicious intent to try to take a county road and turn it into a private road sometimes. It just depends. And
Well-
then,
That's where cattle guards come in though.
right.
You do it at your property line, you don't take over the rest of it.
Right, and that would be a more appropriate way to do it instead of stringing a fence up. But a lot of these roads are by prescription as well, and that creates a lot of confusion in the legal realm. And that, those are things we're just gonna have to sort through, and I wish I could forecast what the outcome's gonna be from the beginning, but I don't think it'd be wise to do that. I think, everybody's just gonna have to stay engaged as we go through the whole process, because until we can get a hearing, we can get a road validated or vacated, depending on the circumstances, then we're really not gonna know how it's gonna impact the other people here at the table.
Well, just for you guys, you'll be here longer than I will. I mean, this is something we've been working on now 5 years. I mean, a long time. And we have the process now rolling. It would really be a tragedy to put a stop to it now when we've made so much progress. And the hardest part of the work is already maybe behind us with identifying who's gonna do this and the process of doing it. So, I would very much be in favor of continuing down this path until we've identified these and just put this behind us so that we have things codified.
I see most of this happening on the DF development properties, and that's kind of county, DF, and Forest Service all involved in that.
Dave doesn't Fish and Game, I mean, they shut down a lot of roads and gate them during hunting season. And then they open them back up first thing in spring, so.
Well, and that
So
Forest
would
Service
you have
would,
signage there at those gates?
only if it's on county property.
If they're controlling, if a private property owner controls access and they're allowing the public to access private property, we'd have nothing there. That would be up to the private property owner to do that. Now, if it's a public road and it crosses through private property, that's a much different issue. But there are private parcels that they will allow the public to access during hunting season or whatever it is. That's up to them to control.
And some of these, again, where a lot of this came up was when there was large land acquisition here. And if we can partner together and we can negotiate on, well, you need this road, we don't need this road, right now is the time to negotiate that and get these easements in place that we always thought we had, that we did not.
Yeah, this isn't unique to Valley County either, so you may have reached out or could reach out to your counterpart in other rural counties and get some information. I know that the county prosecutors are talking about these road validation issues quite a bit. There was a big case in Shoshone County. Supreme Court just last week, actually, it was a really important case because the dispute that ended up in front of the court was whether or not the county was required to officially record a document in the clerk's office that would be the final step in actually validating a road. The opinion basically said that's not a requirement. They were able to validate the road with minutes from the hearing, and that was sufficient for the court. The court actually found for the private property owners on a different matter, but the most important part of that for our purposes was there wasn't an official document that needed to be recorded in the clerk's office to complete that validation process, which if that would have been the case, we would have to probably go back on all of our roads that were validated, decades and decades ago to complete that. Because I don't think any county in Idaho had gone to that formal of a process, especially when we're talking roads that were built in 1905.
Well, there was legislation last year too, Brett, I think by Bonner's Ferry, that was discussing easements onto access points onto national forest roads, which would impact us greatly on some of these things. So, I mean, there's circulating legislation also and thoughts behind that would be a real problem. Owyhee County was taking very strong stance against this legislation, which we need to do also, but so
who's
there's a
taking
reason.
over? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Who's in charge of Old Council Road? And at this point,
I was gonna say, I think that falls on our department.
So, but that's a broad question.
That's a bigger question,
Charge
because
of Old Council.
we also, the next step with the Old Council Road is that we need to meet with the two private parcel owners to talk about moving the road.
There is a pending petition
right?
on that. So we're gonna, now again, that's just that lower 0.1 miles or,
I think it's like a mile and a half. It's about half the road, I think.
yeah, not
Well,
not a big chunk, but.
that's part of your project. You need to complete it through, so.
So there will be another public hearing on that petition, and the question's gonna be, you wanna vacate that 45-degree angle and align it on more perpendicular with West Mountain Road, so.
And that's where a lot of input from the road department on, where the realignment occurs. Is there safety concerns there? Is there any kind of concern on where that realignment is?
Yes. Yeah, as maybe you remember from Corral Creek, in order to vacate a road, you have to have a finding of it's in the public interest to vacate. And there's very specific steps and a very specific process to do that.
Access points are important, but I do hear your concerns, so we will mitigate as much as we can and get the process rolling.
Where's mud, Dan?
Where's mud?
I'm prepared to go out in the woods now with that leafy spurge.
I'm gonna look it up and see what it is for certain.
did.
Sure, I don't.
Go to the Noxious Weed website. It's all over the West Mountain area. So. And it was one of the first noxious weeds that Steve Anderson actually identified. And it was actually in Adams County. So you'll see it outside of our.
Has he notified people that, if we have any in our area that?
It's all in the website, so it's identified there.
But it's mostly on the west side, you said?
It's all the way north. So it goes up to Black Hawk subdivision. From the old council road on north.
Leafy spurge. Oh, knapweed. I recognize that one.
Notice that or
Touch the
something.
ground and that way to show
Don't
up.
touch the leafy spurge.
Don't rub your eyes. Don't have your kids play in.
Well, I've seen this all over the place. Actually, toxic to humans and livestock. I've seen this before.
I'll use it for TP.
Don't recognize
Never.
that?
I didn't.
I don't think it would work though.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Good conversation. Leafy spurge distribution. Yeah, it's right on the county line. So up next is not until 11:15. So Doug, if you will mute us for now.
Okay.